Next up, I'm incredibly excited to introduce you all to Her Excellency, the Second Lady of Ghana and Chair of AFRIWOCC, Samira Bawumia. Please welcome her. Isn't it nice to see so many excited faces, isn't it? And so many phones as well. Her Excellency, thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure.
I think we all would feel like the time is a little bit spoiled if this guy introduced you. So maybe we take just a couple of minutes for you to introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you very much, and hello to everybody. I wear several hats, literally, so I am a global champion for the Clean Cooking Alliance. I'm also a champion for the Clean Air Fund. I'm also a champion for the Health and Energy Platform for WHO. But importantly, I founded the Samira Empowerment and Humanitarian Projects, which helps with the SDGs in Ghana, not all of them, but we focus on education, on health, and women empowerment. And I also am the chair of the Africa Women and Children's Conference, which is a conference that brings together young people on the continent, women from the continent of Africa, to discuss climate action. So in brief, that's what I do, or a part of what I do. Thank you.
Where does one start? Maybe at the beginning. Let us start at the beginning. When you first embarked on your journey, on your mission-driven journey, I must only imagine that there must have been roadblocks in your way. Now, for all the young leaders here in the room, how did you overcome these roadblocks in the very beginning for you to finally be able to sit here and say, well, this is what I have done?
Well, rightly, it's not easy to start a not-for-profit and to be successful at it. For us at Samira Empowerment and Humanitarian Projects, which we call SEHP, I think the most important thing is to be scientific about how you approach things. So we did a lot of research before we embarked on our projects. It took us about a year to embark on one of our projects, which is a maternal health project to lower maternal mortality in a community. And in that research, you find out that there are sociocultural issues that affect the success of the project you're embarking on. So you learn how to enter into the community, for instance. So with our maternal mortality project, which we call the Safe Delivery Project, is basically a project that gives birth kits to women who are in their third trimester. And this birth kit has sterile supplies for a safe delivery. It has also an anti-hemorrhaging medication in it. And it also encourages the women to go for skilled care in the worst affected communities in Ghana, where we were experiencing high mortality rates from women who are going to have children. But what made us successful in that instance, at least initially we had some challenges, but we realized that we needed to include the men in the conversation. We needed to do community entry. So we go in, we meet the chiefs, we meet the men in there, and then we speak to them. And then eventually when they bought into it, now they are the ones who bring their women to the hospital. And the project has been so successful that we're replicating it in another community, because we actually, after 3 years of being in that community, we registered 0 mortality for that project. With our other projects as well, it's really a stakeholder engagement. That's more the issue. Well, that's aside the financing issue, but in terms of the challenges, it's about people understanding why you're doing it. And sometimes people have problems, but the solutions you're proffering are not exactly what they want as the solution. So you need to engage people. You need to explain why the solution is good for them, and they need to buy into it before you embark on any project. So that has been really good. With AFRIWOCC, which is the Africa Women and Children's Conference, it was an idea that was birthed out of what is the voice of women on the continent? We talk about climate action. We talk about it in an abstract, Africa needs support, or we need these interventions. But who are the hardest hit? And so that's how we came up with AFRIWOCC, to say we need to drill down, we want to focus on who is the worst hit and how can women be part of the solution? Because you can't design solutions for people without including them in the process. And that is what birthed AFRIWOCC. It's been a success so far because it's just been a year out, but it's catching on. And I've seen some ladies in here who supported us during the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week, and we were also well represented at COP. But the key messaging is engagement, and getting buy-in and getting the support before you embark on any project.
In many cases, it can be very frustrating because sometimes you feel you're the only person who realizes that there is a problem.
Exactly.
And then you need to do work on a very ground level. You say engaging with your stakeholders, essentially explaining and speaking to them. Now, can you, without of course naming any names, tell us of a story of you having to overcome the extra challenge of somebody really not understanding the problem, and sort of what you would suggest to the young leaders in the room in how they could overcome their own challenges whenever somebody says, well, great, but that doesn't seem like a big issue to me?
Right. So, as I mentioned in my intro, I'm also a champion for the Clean Cooking Alliance. And so I think people are a little dismissive of it because they think clean cooking is a cook stove issue and it's a women's issue. And once you sit down and try to convince people, so they say, oh, the second lady is just dealing with cook stoves issues. But it's far from that. So you need to explain to them the codependencies of the issues. So for instance, the work we do in maternal mortality or to reduce maternal mortality has a direct effect or is directly impacted by energy poverty, for instance. I mean, there's 2.3 billion people across the world who do not have access to clean cooking technologies or energy, right? And of that 2.3 billion, 800 million of them are in Africa. Now, 800 million people in Africa, and every year, 3.3 million newborn deaths are deemed to have been occurred because of the pollution from energy sources. So we're using charcoal to cook, we're using firewood to cook. So when I'm having a project, a maternal mortality project, for instance, where I'm giving the woman supplies to go to the hospital, I'm giving her anti-hemorrhaging medication, we're supporting her with skilled care, and she goes back home in a kitchen that is filled with smoke and black carbon, then you know that that child might not even survive. When you have a child, a girl child that you want to encourage to go to school, who has to wake up every morning, go into the village or into the bush to fetch charcoal or firewood before she can come home and cook, then you know, and she doesn't have an efficient cook stove as well, so the food is taking maybe 3-4 times longer to cook, and she has to do that before she goes to school, then you know she's impacted. When you're trying to get your SDG, to get a women empowerment, you're trying to get a woman into the job market, and she's slaving in the kitchen over food. So these are the ways you ought to explain the issues for them to understand that when you speak, for instance, about clean cooking, it's not just a cooking issue. It is a development issue because it impacts health, it impacts education, it impacts well-being, it impacts the environment, So that's sort of how we go about with the explanations on how issues are interdependent.
It opens your eyes when you realize that clean cooking, just to use your example, is not the root of it all, and it is not the only issue we have. It essentially is all interconnected.
Exactly.
Right? So applying the framework of the SDGs in many cases makes a lot of sense, but then to maybe switch the conversation towards that a little bit, then also that framework doesn't work all the time, does it?
Well, exactly, for the points that I said. And I think when we look at the SDGs in general, it is really a checklist of all the issues that culminate into how we develop as a people. And success, you can measure success by where you started from, isn't it? So if you're running a race and somebody started halfway, the chances are they'll complete the race before you do. So that's the issue with the SDGs and with Africa, for instance, because we have so many issues to overcome. But then we're impacted by external factors. So we talk about, say, climate action. Africa only contributes 4% of global emissions. 4%. But Africa is the hardest hit in terms of the impact of climate change. So we have governments who have their small budgets or relatively small budgets that they are allocating to, say, health, to education and all of that. But their health needs are impacted severely because of climate change. So you are spending on adaptation instead of moving forward. So that is the sort of the lack of parity in where we're going. And also, it's almost as if the world has set a goal, but there isn't the support for some parts of the world, or there isn't enough support to attain the goal. So as I said, if governments are now allocating funds to climate mitigation and adaptation, then where do they get the funds for development or for the other projects that are important, or, you know, they would have been priority projects? For instance, we're working with women in communities where these are fishing communities are along the coast, and they are losing their livelihoods now because the catch is not coming in. I was fortunate to work with a team from the Salata Institute at Harvard University, and they were looking at the impact of climate change along the coast of Africa, West Africa. And the issues were the same along the coast of West Africa. So communities are being wiped out. That creates food insecurity. That creates a loss of jobs and the obvious impact on livelihoods. So that is really why it's difficult for Africa to attain the SDGs. Africa, the AU, the Africa Union also has its ambitious 2063 agenda, which the SDGs feed into. But unfortunately, we're also impacted by external issues.
The name of the game is collaboration in many cases.
Absolutely.
Intra-African collaboration, like you are starting it, but then collaboration really on a global scale. So very candidly, how can the young leaders in the room make sure they collaborate accordingly?
Well, that is why we set up the Africa Women and Children's Conference, because young voices have to be heard. You cannot provide solutions that do not involve the stakeholders and the young people. Africa has the largest youth population in the world. So young people, especially in Africa, ought to be part of this conversation that's been had. We need to share technology. We need to see what is working in other places. We need to share indigenous knowledge, for example. So somebody may be in Kenya and I'm in Ghana, and the solutions that they found in Kenya can be replicated in Ghana so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. So the most important thing is for the young people to be in tune with the issues and to be part of the solution in terms of making their voices heard. And then I listened to the panel that came in just before. Young people should be in the conversation. It shouldn't be a conversation for young people, but it should be with young people. And really, when we work together, we win together.
100%. When we work together, we win together. There is a dynamic to this where I believe the current leaders of the world can also learn from young people. And I was just at a conference in Switzerland last week where they talked about this idea of reverse mentoring almost, where every senior person mentoring a young person as well received mentoring from that young person. Yet again, in your case, an amazing opportunity as well, right? Because it's not the people, in many cases, not the people who take the decisions, are the people who cook with the wrong type of coal. And
Absolutely.
So how can we then kickstart this? Do we all go out here and say, well, we've been inspired and that's it, thank you very much? I don't think so. What can they do?
Well, so I fancied myself a young person, but apparently I'm not. So I have this really young team of people that I work with, and they furnish me with ideas all the time. So I agree with you that we need, I mean, if you're providing solutions for the future, for today and for the future is the young people.
Yeah.
So it is important that leaders recognize that young people can be the solution. If we got it right, things wouldn't be what it is today. So we need to give the next generation, well, they are even the leaders of today. I was very inspired by the young lady who was here earlier, very confident, she's aware of the issues, and those are the voices that we need to listen to. So everybody should have a young person they're talking to, because it is their world. It is a fresh set of eyes. We should be re-socialized. The older generation, and I shudder to think I'm one of them, but you know, the older generation should be re-socialized and to see things from their perspectives. So please, the young people, find somebody to mentor. You can mentor me.
I'm also looking, by the way. 100% agree. Re-socialize. Do you sense this in this room, where there is a certain anticipation towards what is going to happen once we all leave that stage? You just said, find somebody to mentor. And as we have 4 more minutes left, because you're full of nuggets of gold, and I would love for you to share all of them with the stage here, unless before I start asking questions that they don't really want to hear. When you see the people here, also interacting with people during the conference, what do you feel like they could, what is the edge? What could they even more contribute? How they can even change the fact that we are just some of us here and not everybody's talking about the issue we're talking about?
Right. Everybody can do something.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And we tend to want to see what other people are doing. But even being here is doing something. Because I was taking notes earlier, and I'm sure everybody's learned a thing or two. And you also have to come to the discussion with the idea of an equitable conversation with people, with respect for people, not leaving anybody behind, to say, okay, this is working for me, but does this work for everybody? Are the solutions or the conversations we're having, is it just, is it equitable, is it fair to everybody? Those are the sorts of attitude that can help us to develop together. The idea of this SDGs is a common position of the world, is our shared humanity, because it applies to everybody. So how do your solutions influence change on a global platform, but at your local level? And for me, that is it. And then also, when you find a solution, or if you have a solution, how do you put it out there so that it is available to everyone? Africa had a sad story during the COVID when there were vaccines, but Africa wouldn't get vaccines because the West wanted to exhaust the vaccines for their population, have reserve vaccines for their populations before sending some over to Africa. And that was a wake-up call for us, you know, and so now there are vaccine centers being sent. Even getting the vaccine makers to give generic versions to Africans was difficult. But that is not the attitude that we're going to develop with together. So everybody here today should go away feeling like I can do something wherever I am, but I should do it for the greater good.
Luckily, the world is round. And if somebody doesn't win, we all don't in the long run. So maybe the one thing we can take away from this is we all have our little microcosmos of communities that we are part of. And we've all come together to learn at this very central point. Now, as a next step, let us all go out again and let's spread.
Absolutely.
And with that, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was an absolute pleasure. What an amazing time.
Thank you, everyone.
And with that, and with about 15% of battery left on my iPad. Guys, thank you so much for being here for this part of the conference. I hope you had a good time. I certainly did. Please reach out to all of the panelists and the speakers, because they love to talk to you. And then, as we said, spread the message. Thank you very much.